I'm going to take a slightly different tack from the previous presentation. My background was big corporate company. I worked at Goodyear Tire Rubber Company for 27 years, various different roles across Europe and Eastern Africa. And then 2 years ago, for my sins, I decided to become an entrepreneur and actually get together with a business partner who's been in the automotive body shop business for over 20 years. And we actually opened a body shop called Star Center here in Dubai. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit of a discussion around some of the learnings that I've had, specifically with regards to the insurance business in this market. So while it's UAE specific, it's going to be Dubai very specific. I'm going to be as candid as possible when I can actually talk through what I've learned in the last 18 months of an operational business. But I'm going to pull it back because for me, you guys are all senior executives. You're less interested to hear about, let's call it an individual number. You guys should all be worried about the strategy and the so what. Okay, you're worried about competition, you're worried about the market, you're worried about the operating environment. And what's important from the perspective there is, if you take anything out of what I'm going to tell you today, what should you do? What are the questions that you should be asking yourselves as an insurance company? And what are the decisions and actions that you should be taking in order to be successful into the future? Because that's kind of the way that I look at it whenever I look at the business. So I'm going to go a bit down and dirty into some of the details, but then I'm going to pull it back towards the end to go, so what? The difference between that guy and this guy is 18 months of fixing cars, okay? It's been a very, very interesting exercise. As I say, I've come from big business, multiple countries, not worried about what we're doing today, worried about how we win next quarter, next year, and the year after that. Having big competitors with lots of money. So in a way, I think sort of similar to some of the things that you guys are maybe confronting in the insurance business. And before I came into the business, I expected to be worried about costs and efficiency. I was warned about the fact that there's a lot of shrinkage in this industry. I was surprised to actually discover how pervasive it is, okay? And when I talk about some of the sort of specifics, I'm going to bring it back to what does it actually mean from a financial perspective. Because at the end of the day, a business runs on cash flow, and your discounted cash flow will determine what the value is in your business. So what does this mean, okay? And what does it mean strategically? And what I learned a lot about trust. I think trust is one of the things that is missing. So the consequence of shrinkage is a lack of trust, and the consequence of a lack of trust is a lack of repeatability and visibility and transparency, and that just adds cost into the system, and it adds cost into the system for all of the players. Can we jump to the next one? Shall I do it?
I can sit and be your operator if you want as well.
Thanks, Frederick. Okay, the slide is just here for me to talk about, okay? This is going to be mostly just me speaking. I'm not going to provide a lot of numbers. If anyone would like to have a more detailed discussion afterwards, please feel free. You guys all know the process of how the insurance claim process works. When we set up the business, and we started in January 2025, we started fixing vehicles in May 2025. So we're operating for 18 months. We've been fixing vehicles for just over 12 months. What struck me is the amount of leakage that can occur across the entire process, okay? Before you even start, and you actually even open your doors, there's a vetting process, and some of it comes from agencies that vet you to say, right, you're qualified to repair vehicles. There's agencies that vet you, that you're allowed to do insurance work, etc. In those initial discussions, there's a lot of transparency issues. I'm going to caveat everything with what I say is, we have several operations in South Africa, okay? We work to a very high standard in South Africa. And in South Africa, like in Western Europe, like in North America, the industry is extremely mature, it's extremely controlled, and it's extremely transparent. So we've come into the UAE bringing the same ethos that goes, we're going to apply the same standards into the UAE that we usually operate under in South Africa. So in South Africa, we get audited every single year. by the automotive manufacturers to say, we give you a certificate that you may repair a Mercedes-Benz, valid for a year. Okay. Here it's a much more vague process. And the first thing that came across was lots of intimations and discussions. Okay. Lots of discussions about, listen, not to worry, if you want to get 5 stars, if you want to get a high level rating, we're open to discussions. If you don't have equipment, it's not a problem. We know someone that you can borrow it from. You can bring equipment in. You can make sure that you're able to comply. Don't be too worried about that. Okay. Now this, for me, I don't see this as a positive. I see this as a negative, because our workshop, we are aiming to comply, to have the equipment, to have the standards. And what that just says is then I can't trust the ratings. Okay. That people are able to influence the outcome of the ratings, which means I put less credibility and less importance on it. Once you've got your ratings, you then need to be checked and evaluated. So you start talking to the different companies, insurance companies, etc. And at some point in time, someone from the network is going to come around and they're going to have a look at your workshop. They're going to come to do an assessment where they want to know how many lifts you've got, how many people you employ, how many, do you have a bench, do you not have a bench? And part of this whole discussion, again, there's lots of intimations with regards to, listen, we can definitely make sure that your rating is higher. We can make sure that the quality rating, our company uses an ABC ratio, this company uses something different. And there's a lot of intimations with regards to, if we talk to each other, if we help each other, we can make sure that your rating comes out higher. Okay? This is just to get that initial report done. Then once the report is done, a whole bunch of documentation has to get sent across. Each company is slightly different. You need a brochure, you need a certain profile that goes across. This gets added together with whatever the assessment is, and then you're going to end up having a discussion with a network manager, someone who has to look at all of the different applications from the hundreds of different garages across the area to say who makes it onto the panel, who doesn't make it onto the panel. Okay. Again, when you have these different discussions, it's not everywhere, but it's quite prevalent. There's a discussion about, listen, I've got a very massive pile of applications. Okay, so whether you're at the bottom of the pile, the middle of the pile, or the top of the pile is open for discussion. Okay, whether you're at the top of the pile and you make it on to what's called the approved list, there's a discussion. If you're on the list, would you like to be at the end of the list or would you like to be at the top of the list? There's a discussion. Okay, all of these things are, maybe I'll do a slight adjacent. My approach in all of these is I play dumb. Okay, I am here, I don't understand, I'm here representing a garage, and what I try to do is I go as many times as possible and I try to work my way up the chain as much as possible. Because the best way to combat with the intimations is persistence, and to just go there with, I'm back, I'm here to talk again, I was here 6 weeks ago, how's it going with the profile? And we've actually been able to have some success, but time becomes a critical area. You guys all know that time is money. So just to make sure that you're able to interact, there's this huge potential for leakage in the discussion. Once you're now on the panel, okay, and you then start getting to the actual work starts being directed, this is a very interesting discussion. Volume, okay, and both positive and negative volume. How many jobs do you get, okay? How many good jobs do you get? How many of the 800, 1,000, 1,200 dirham minimum, charge jobs do you get? The 5,000 dirhams and less. How many good vehicles do you get? How many, let's call it self-assessed vehicles do you get? This is a discussion that comes up all the time. This is a discussion that comes from multiple areas, because there's the insurance company, there's the broker, there's the different places where an assessment center, for example, where a vehicle might come up, and there's this constant discussion, and this kind of bubbles up through my team to go, we can influence the number of jobs we get, we can influence the type of jobs we get. Okay? Again, leakage in the system. Once the vehicle comes onto your site, okay, you then start getting into the assessment process. The assessment process here is antiquated. To quote my business partner who's been doing this, and he's third generation of fixing vehicles, okay? His grandfather had an auto body shop, okay, doing panel and paint. His father at an auto body shop doing panel and paint, him and his brother. He has 3 operations in South Africa, his brother works in the UK. They both say what we see today in the industry in the UAE is like a mature market 20 years ago. Okay? In a place like South Africa, when you do an estimation, it's detailed. Okay? It's got time and materials. Okay? If you're going to fix the doors, what is the vehicle? You have to have stripping time. You have to have disassembly, reassembly time. Is there panel beating? Is there paint? How much is paint materials? What is the quality of paint materials? All of this goes into an estimation. It's completely visible and it gets sent across. Here, it's handwritten quotations, itemized at a very low level, okay? And often it's sort of like a bit of a horse trading discussion. If you have sort of assessment centers where there's 10 garages and they're kind of all standing there going, who gets the job, who's got the best price? Okay? So there's a lack of transparency. And in that discussion, there is such a potential for it to swing positively or negatively, and that can be for either the insurance company or the repairer. Okay? Is the work overstated? Is the work understated? Are there items that are added that shouldn't be added or not added? Are we talking original parts, used original parts, aftermarket parts? Are we talking replace or repair? The entire thing comes together, and the full discussion at the end of the day ends up in a number. This is a 15,000 dirham estimate. This is a 5,000 dirham estimate. Everybody knows that there's a cut-off line, okay? So there's this crazy situation where, for example, if I know that everything is 5,000 or less, it's going to be given at a fixed rate, then I need to make sure my estimate is 5,000 or more. If I know that whatever I put forward is going to get cut in half, there's an amazing amount of estimates that come out at 11,000 dirhams plus, okay? Because I'm guessing that 11,000 dirhams is going to work out at 5.5, 6, and I get a bit more money for it. So it's not a transparent process at all. The worst part now is when you actually you've got an estimate, you've got a vehicle, and now the actual work starts. Yes. We have a very robust and a very transparent repair process. Okay, we track everything. So I know exactly what the initial estimate was, I know exactly what the agreed estimate was, and I know what I would call the final estimate is, which is what we see when we actually open up the vehicle and have a look properly inside what we have to fix. I know exactly how those estimates work versus the work order, and we do a detailed costing, including everything, so we can come back to see exactly how many hours were spent by who, what materials were used, what parts were used by who. When you get into that and you start opening up vehicles, what you realize is a lot of vehicles, this is not their first accident. So there's now a huge amount of leakage in the actual repair process. If you look at the job and you go, oh goodness, I don't have enough money, question is, do you not replace something? Do you repair it? Instead of using an original parts, do you start going for aftermarket parts? And inside the whole supply chain around getting these parts and pieces, as soon as you step away from new original, everything gets very, very murky. Sharjah has everything, okay? There's people who are available who can get you something. You've got no idea where it comes from, what the condition was. You have to sort of see what you've got and what you can evaluate. This is not done under the books. This is done in conjunction with the insurance companies. Most of the policies, a lot of the policies I see, there's a decision up front that goes original parts but used. This is an officially accepted part of the process. The risk with this is, as a workshop, again, if you want to adhere to a given standard, if you do things right, sometimes it can cost you. It can cost you a lot, okay? If you do things wrong, you're not just affecting quality, you're affecting safety. We are talking about often vehicles that are up to 1 million dirhams plus in value, okay? They've got ADAS, extremely sophisticated advanced driving assistance programs. All of these things have to be recalibrated. All of these things have to be checked, okay? We talk about it in the symposiums all the time. And I see vehicles coming through where I have to have an uncomfortable discussion to say, listen, we've opened up the vehicle. It's not part of the spec. It's got nothing to do with the accident that we're currently here to repair. But the airbag hasn't been replaced. Okay, it's missing. Or we're discovering that, I know that you say this is the first time the vehicle's been involved in an accident, but the central CPU does not match the VIN number. Okay, because of this, the central distance control, for the automated driving and cruise control does not work properly. Okay, there's an aftermarket kit has been set up. where it's interacting. And then this is not covered in the quote, and then we have to go back to the insurance company and back to the customer to go, do we fix it? Don't we fix it? If we fix it, who's paying? Is the customer paying? Is the insurance company paying? So I could speak for hours, okay, and I've just given a couple of tastes. And this is me coming from the perspective where I've again worked for a big multinational corporate. We get audited at every single level. I have been on every single training in the world with regards to compliance. I'm sure you guys are all aware as competitors in an industry what you can and can't say when you're in a forum like this, for example. I've had situations in Africa where we've had to as Goodyear, go back to the SEC and say we've got issues and we'd like to preemptively pay some fines, etc. This is quite pervasive, okay? So what? So what does this mean? I would estimate, based on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and I kind of did the mental exercise coming into this talk, I would estimate the shrinkage at about 10 to 15%, okay? 10 to 15%, okay? If you've got a combined ratio of 91 point something percent, if this was your business, okay, this would be 100 to 150% all of the profit that you make, EBITDA, okay? So earnings before interest and depreciation. If you step into a workshop, okay, I am discovering there's a very low level of financial acumen spread throughout the industry. There's this constant confusion of turnover with profit, okay? If you are losing 10 to 15% of your turnover, okay, you don't have a viable business. The cash flow implications of this as well, because this slows down the process. So not only do you get less money, but you get less money later. We have had to have some serious relooks at our discounted cash flow models to have a look and say, wow, hang on a second, this is not working quite the way we thought it is, okay? What we experience is we experience delays and it gets slower. If I look at some of the requests, and like I say, 10 to 15%, I don't understand how anyone does this. What I do see is I see the garages around us. We're in Alkers. I see garages around us going out of business, left, right, and center, okay? It's not viable. What's different to this market versus a lot of other markets, your biggest cost is not people. Mostly it's people, right? Your biggest cost, and I put parts aside, okay? So you have parts and materials to the side. So let's call it outside of parts and materials. Your biggest cost is not people, it's your fixed overhead. Rent is very expensive, okay? So you need to run with certain gross profit levels, otherwise you cannot cover your fixed costs. So the strategic part of this is, what I see is if this does not get addressed, the people who remain in the market are people who do the private business, the cash business, the non-insurance business. Those are the guys who are in and they're thriving and they're surviving. And that's where we're targeting as well, because we can see the value in them. The risk is the people who do insurance business are in a very tricky and difficult situation. The risk of business failure is constant, or the risk of actually giving very, very poor quality in return for what you're paying for is constant. So that's the negative. But in business, any negative is an opportunity, okay? And this is, again, as a bunch of senior executives, so what? What does this mean? In economic theory, there are two major ways that corporations compete, okay? Efficiency and differentiation. I'll make it very simple, okay? Efficiency is who does it better, cheaper, faster, more effective. Differentiation is who gives better service, who's got something that the other person doesn't have, okay? And what I see in this industry is currently the insurance business is on its way towards commoditization. Everyone has the same cheap price. Everyone has the same cheap quality, okay? Everyone has to renew their insurance every year. And we had the previous discussion going, who's going to give me 25 dirhams cheap, okay? I saw this in tires. Tires is always in risk of becoming a commodity. What I see here is I see insurance is becoming a commodity. There's no difference between the big and the small. Service is bad wherever you go to. Repairs is not great. Costs are not under control. The opportunity becomes, hang on a second. If we can put transparency into the system, okay, and we make sure that we open up, okay, to see that we're getting, from a workshop's perspective, it's fair recompensation for fair work. You do what you say you're going to do. You spend the money that you say you're going to spend. In South Africa, for example, there is complete transparency. And that means the number between the repairer and the insurance company, it moves up and down based on reality. Parts pricing is transparent. It's just a markup discussion. Number of hours is transparent, and it gets measured, okay? And if the estimate was 10 and it ends up at 9.5, 9.5 is what gets invoiced. If it's 11.5, that's what gets invoiced. The time and attention is not then going to, I think you're cheating, I think you're telling the truth. The time and attention goes to, what's the outlier? Let my assessor go and actually have a look. And it's a very different exercise looking at actual work done versus what do I think is going to happen over the next 3-4 weeks. Here you're looking at an actual, I replaced this, I fixed this. Let's go get the cameras, let's go check the worksheets. Okay, did you really spend that hours on the vehicle or didn't you spend the hours? The customer is at the end of the day the person who gets the full benefit, okay? This is the person who's the most important reason in all of our lives. I have not met a single person that I met for the first time, okay, who's come into our workshop, who's had a good previous experience. The number of people who literally force their way into the workshop because they want to see our paint room, because they don't trust and believe with the type of paint that we say we're using. The guys who come in unannounced, okay, who want to go and see their car, because they literally want you to put the car on the lift, they want you to lift it up, and they want you to show them that you've replaced the parts. There's such a negative perception because everyone has had such bad experiences. And if I look around the room, I bet if you think back to when you've had your vehicles, okay, there's so many challenges. So the opportunity becomes, if you fix this, you have happier customers, okay? The person who fixes it first and fixes it best, okay, has differentiation and efficiency in the market, is more competitive and moves away from commoditization. The workshop, the good will survive, the bad will disappear, okay, and fair compensation for fair work. In my experience, honest operators don't fear transparency. They welcome it, okay, because this allows us to clean up, which is historically a very complicated and dirty industry. The obvious question then becomes, okay, how? There's a lot of insurance companies, there are thousands, if not millions of claims that have been processed. The permutations for those is almost astronomical. I mean, we look at the previous presentation, how many numbers were there on that page? And that's just the outcomes. That's just at a country level, okay? How many different permutations? You can have 10 accidents on the same vehicle in the same market in the same area. Every single one of those 10 accidents will have similarities and differences. This is where technology starts to come in. So for the first time, I think the UAE has got some catch up on processes where it can get to world-class standards versus other markets. You can fly today to Germany or UK or South Africa and see what the future looks like from a process perspective. But what's different is we've now got, with AI, with technology, with automation, the ability to actually at least handle the 95% of items in some automated way. And by handling something in an automated way where you're processing thousands of transactions a second, to be quite blunt, the human being cannot keep up in order to influence the system fast enough. And because the exceptions are then treated as exceptions, which means you have more eyes on the exception, there's less areas for individuals to basically create leakage. So that's my message. I hope you guys have found it instructive. If there's one thing I'd sort of take away is 10 to 15% is a big number. If you don't differentiate, whoever differentiates first is going to win, my perception. It's a broken system. It's going to fall over at some point in time. The current situation with the war is exacerbating that. Okay, so if you thought your network was wobbly before, the next 12 months, I could think you're going to see a lot of players falling out of the market. So now it's a great risk and reward situation. Managed correctly, this is the competitive niche.